Morning, everybody. How we doing today? It's Friday, June 12th. I am in Freeport, Illinois, an hour and a half, 2 hours west of Chicago. Satellite of Rockford, Illinois. My mother-in-law had surgery yesterday, and we're here to kind of see how she's doing and all that. So I drove up here with my wife yesterday and kids. So there won't be an official episode today, but I still wanted to say a few things with y'all. First and foremost, as this virus thing was kind of winding down and more people are going back to work, and there's more and more people not on lockdown all the time. Give me your idea of the perfect amount of the Jazz Shepherd. I've been doing every day almost for 3 months, and to be honest, I've kind of gotten used to it, but I know for some people it's hard to keep up. But I know a lot of people also appreciate the daily distraction. But as things get back to normal, if that's even a thing, I don't know, what would be the perfect amount for everybody, and see if we could come up with some kind of a consensus. 4 or 5 episodes a week, stay 6 or 7. 1 or 2. Keep it to those 3 answers. 1 or 2 a week, 4 or 5 a week, 6 or 7 a week. And we'll see what people say. At this point, still got tons of things I want to talk about and cover. We haven't even really dug into saxophone. There's tons of player biographies I want to do yet. So there's lots of material. I've always got something to blabber about. My mouth never really stops, for those of you that know me. Anyway, there won't be any vinyl to show you today, so I got some Clifford Brown with strings playing on my laptop. It seemed like one of the most beautiful backgrounds I could think of for any situation, to be honest. Clifford's such a great player. I'm such a huge fan. But the next thing I want to talk to you about, and this is something that's come up in the comments a little bit, and something I just want to clarify, is I never got into this YouTube thing trying to present myself as a jazz expert or a jazz historian even. And while I do share lots of history and context, it was not me saying, oh, I know so much about jazz, I'm such an expert, I know all the history, and I'm going to cover every era. It was never that. It was people heard me talking about how the music made me feel, and an expression of just how I felt about the music, how I connected with it, and what it made me think and feel. And I got into this to express what makes jazz, what drives it, what was the engine that fueled this rocket. And it was the oppression, and it was my take on that a lot of people thought was interesting and not being really spoken much. And it was that people said you should make a YouTube channel talking about that. And so the focus has always been on the social constructs that drive great art. History is made by the winners of the great wars. The losers of those wars are given the opportunity to make great art. It's when you're not free for centuries that you can know what freedom looks like. It's when you have no justice that you can comment on what justice should be. Most of us live in such comfort and have it so easy that we really don't have enough input or context to even comment on what justice is or should be. And the black experience in America, it's just filled with the story in America. It's just got so much sorrow, so much sadness. The black experience has been it's just painful, you know. But working in the black community like I did for 15 years as a DJ, I really saw how difficult the experience still was today, and how different they experience versus the average white American's perception of things. They're very different. And I kind of wanted to say that when I was talking about jazz, is that the black experience today is difficult. Ask yourself how much more difficult was it back in Armstrong or Ellington's time. That was the questions I got. It was that thought process. I'm trying to put myself into their shoes that constantly informed me and drove me emotionally. It connected with me, and it gave me anger. It gave me sadness and sorrow. It gave me just an insight into how much more difficult the times must have been for these jazz artists than it is for the black community today. And so it was that was why I made a YouTube channel. I wanted to express that. But this music isn't just about, how great a player somebody is. And I've talked about the white and the black players. White players can play, but they're coming from a different place. They're not telling you the same story. And it's the black expression of that sorrow and that tyranny that is the power in this music. And I would rather listen to Lockjaw Davis expressing joy and celebration because he's not dead yet today in one of his live jam concerts with Eddie Griffin or whoever, Johnny Griffin, than listen to some 70s or 80s prog jazz with the most virtuistic players in the world, but I don't feel nothing. When I listen to music, I want to think in their headspace. I want to try to get where this guy's coming from. What's he trying to tell me? And Roger Waters, you listen to him long enough, he's really being informed by the Second World War, a lot of the injustice and craziness he saw. You listen to John Lennon, you can tell he's very much being driven by his mom and dad's passing, and again, the war has an impact on all British kids from that time frame. You listen to Bob Marley, you can hear what's driving his motivations, And so when I listen to jazz and I try to apply history and my knowledge of time with the music, it just really connected and slapped me in the face at times, And that was kind of what really set this music apart for me and made it special. And being a guy that's DJed and played hip-hop for years, and then you connect hip-hop back to soul and funk. And the funk and the soul takes you back to some great civil rights leaders, And hip-hop had a generation of great MCs that were civil rights leaders. Chuck D and KRS-One are important pieces of the black movement. Curtis Mayfield and Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, those guys made records that are part of the civil rights movement and should be held in high esteem for their social content, not just their musical genius. And so when you go back a generation further, before the time when these guys could say into a microphone, this injustice sucks, it's obvious that these jazz players had to be expressing the same things that Chuck D and Marvin Gaye were saying, but they were saying it through their horns because they weren't allowed to say it into a fucking microphone. It's so clear when you think of that lineage that there's no way that these cats are picking up their horns and not talking about their experience in America, not expressing some of that emotion. And a musician doesn't even always have to be cognizantly thinking about what he's expressing. It can be very subconscious. But there's a lot of metal bands. The guy from Korn was molested by his dad, I believe, was at a young age, or his uncle. And he sings about it at times and comments on it at times. But I feel like it informs most of his anger and his even when he's not singing about it, he's kind of coming from that place. The emotional makeup of people informs their art. And so when I recognize that the words of Curtis Mayfield, the words of Marvin Gaye, the words of Chuck D and Rakim, the words of Nas, all that was coming out from a very eloquent place in jazz without the translation of words. Words are actually quite dishonest. Words are boastful, have ego inflate them. Words are dishonest almost always. There's always elements of truth in words, but there's always deceit and conceit woven in with words. A jazz player isn't allowed the luxury of deceit. He doesn't have the shield of conceit. He only has what his talent is and what his soul is saying to us. And so when he picks up that horn and he's digging into that soul, when you're talking 1956, it's a bad time for the black man in America. When you're talking 65, it's a bad time for the black man in America. When you're talking 1935, shit was really tough. And almost like the tougher the times were, the more joyful the music became to overcome. And because in a way you have a sense of victory over it when you are rejoicing, when you are dancing, when you're feeling freedom in spite of your chains, you actually find a sort of freedom over your oppressor. And that deflates them. They can't break your spirit, and they don't know what they can do to break your spirit. And that's the power of the human condition, the human want to not be suppressed, to not be controlled, to not be held in chains and bondage. And so as I was collecting this jazz, this is a slow process over the course of 2 decades, it got to a point where I realized the LPH kind of launches itself in 1955 with most of these great jazz labels. And I completed the Blue Note discography about 10 years ago. The 1500 series, then the 4000 series, through to the Sale to Liberty at 4274 or whatever it is. 374 records or something like that. I completed that. And it's such a black experience, and it had so much to tell me, and I was learning so much about jazz at that point. But I realized that my knowledge was limited because I was missing so much of the context of what else was happening in jazz at that time. And so what I kind of started to do, I recognized also at the same time that I was less into the avant-garde now than I used to be. When I first came into jazz, I was very into Pharoah Saunders, very into heavy Coltrane, less into Ornette, but I still listened to plenty of Ornette, a lot of those Don Cherry records. Like, I was into a lot of that kind of stuff. And it felt super important to me at the time as a younger guy. But as I got a little older and got married, of course, and then my wife moved in with me, the music I wanted to play for her was different. And I slowly started hearing that the same message was in these records as well. You could play a Clifford Brown, Max Roach record and hear that same resistance. You could play Mobley and Morgan and Bird and hear that same resistance. And it goes back even further. Even Parker, Dizzy, and Bird, Monk, there's a refusal to be defeated. That's kind of powerful. And I just kept digging deeper and deeper. And I decided at some point that the era I loved the most was the 50s and 60s, late 40s, and that the LP era was going to allow me to get all the music from the post-war years into the avant-garde era in its original format and release, with the exception of some of the 40s stuff, which was on 78s. But I started collecting all these different labels and filling all those gaps in. And the more I collected, the more I filled in, the more I realized that what the black musicians had to say in jazz from 45 to 65 is as powerful as an art form can be. And again, it's just this testament to a group of people that it doesn't have to be screeching and militant and political and even have titles that are all expressing those things. You can be listening to some Gravy and Grits, Jimmy Smith, and still you're hearing this defiant celebration of, fuck you, we're going to do our thing. I don't give a fuck how you think we're defeated. Today we got chicken, grits, and gravy. Things are good. Can't hold me down. I'm going to drink some of this wine here. Going to tap on that girl over there a little bit later. I'm a rich man in my eyes. And there's freedom in that, boy. There's freedom in that. And your oppressor cannot stand to see you still free. And you actually can gain a freedom over them in a way that's so powerful. And they live in a kind of a depression and a cloud of tyranny and fear. And they're always afraid of reprisals and uprisings from those that they oppress. And the oppressed usually aren't focused on reprisals. They're usually not focused on a militancy. It takes great violent injustice for them to rise back in that format. It's mostly just about, we just want to be. We just want to exist and live and have education and healthcare and be able to feed our families. That's what makes everybody on this planet the same. Is, where are my kids? Are they home safe tonight? Is there food in their stomachs? Israeli, Palestinian, Iranian, and Iraqi, Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, Chinese, American, Canadian, Mexican, Jew, Muslim, it don't matter. Are my kids home safe? Is there food in their stomachs? There ain't time at the end of the day for somebody in the Middle East to hate America and be like, oh, I hate that country so much. That's bullshit. It's politics. People don't think that way. The average person is just trying to get by. And the black experience in America is just trying to get by. They don't focus all their day on just saying, fuck white America. But yet white America lives in so much fear that they're constantly saying, fuck black America. Oh, fuck that. The whites in this country are so scared. And living here in Freeport, I'm going to talk about this all tomorrow on something I want to show you guys. That whole dichotomy of black and white in America is here in a microcosm in Freeport in a very strong way. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. But I just want to check in and say hello. So when people comment on my videos and they see I'm not covering on stuff past 1965, 1970, that's just who I am. I'm not claiming to be a jazz expert that covers all the time frames. That was never my claim. I claim that I want to talk about the social context of what drives this music. And the music that's most powerful to me is from 45 to 65. And I could feel something tangible in that music at all times that I don't feel listening to Pat Metheny or any of that 70s prog, progressive, I love Weather Report. It's fantastic music, but it doesn't make me think and feel what Parker does at all. It's a whole different vibe, whole different feeling. And anything, regardless of its virtuosity, what's it making me feel is what matters to me. And I don't think virtuosity for the sake of virtuosity is that intriguing. It's not that interesting. Music that's too thought out and too interwoven with my ability to play can become very ego-driven. And often what it tells me about a person or what they're trying to tell me is, look how great I am. I don't get that from Parker or Gillespie or Coltrane or Clifford Brown. It's never about look how great I am. It's I gotta work this hard to feel good right now. I gotta blow the shit out of this horn just to get this shit off my fucking chest. I'm so exhausted. I'm so frustrated for my life in this country. From my experience here in America, I'm so just beaten down that when I pick up my horn today, it's going to take me 6-7 songs just to get a little skip back in my step. And I can't take anything less. I can't take anything more. I'm at my breaking point. So let me put up this saxophone to my mouth and let me blow and exhaust some of that steam. And you can play me the most virtuosic music from the 70s, all that great prog jazz, art jazz, and it doesn't tell me nothing different than Dark Side of the Moon. Good production, some good playing, but it doesn't turn my guts. It doesn't make me think and feel. And so I apologize to people. I'm not trying to sell myself as some jazz expert. I'm not trying to say I know all eras of jazz. I don't. I frankly know very little of jazz past 1970. I know your George Bensons, your George Dukes, your Donald Byrds, your the fusion funk crossover Roy Ayers stuff. I love all that stuff. Stuff I could DJ and play at the clubs. But the more artsy prog rock, Keith Jarrett, ECM, I'm not with it. I don't know about it. I don't really care about it. I'm not going to go out and buy it. It's fine and it's beautiful for what it is, and I get it. But hearing what Keith Jarrett has to say makes me think of Dragonflies. It makes me think of artsy-fartsy pastel murals. It doesn't make me think of, wow, it was tough for these folks to survive. And that story, that honesty, that integrity, that speaking from the gut, my soul craves that. I can't stand bullshit. I can't stand watching the TV because it's feeding me bullshit constantly. I can't watch a movie where the propaganda overtakes me in the first 10 minutes. If you're trying to demonize a culture or a people or a movement with your film, and it's written in such a way, and a lot of films, when they go to the State Department for clearing, there'll be slight details and information changed because they want to shift the focus of what that's saying about certain entities. And if you watch films from the 80s, every film had a strong anti-communist message in it. You watch the show MacGyver from the 80s, and every show you learned about the dangers of communism. It was so subliminally written in every thread. During the whole 9/11 post, every TV show had look out for terrorism. It was written in everything, and anti-Muslims. And films, there's so much dishonesty. And so much posing. And so the honesty of jazz, from this period especially, it just strikes me. It just kills me. And so, again, apologies to people who say, why isn't he talking about 1970s? Why isn't he talking about the 80s guys? I don't know it. I haven't bought it. Probably won't. There's too much stuff from the 50s and 60s I still need to pick up. And I have completed most of the early discographies of all the great jazz labels from the 50s. All the LP era, all the main jazz labels from Chicago to the West Coast of New York. They all kind of launch 12-inch LP series in 55, 56. And I have filled in the first 100 or 200, and in some cases the first 400 or 500 when it comes to Blue Note, Prestige, Riverside, And for the most part, I have fairly well documented those labels and the stories of those labels and the racial makeup of those labels. And it was just all that racial dynamic that was why I made a channel. I wanted to say with honesty some of the things I was seeing and perceiving, looking deep into the looking glass, even from the business side of jazz, even from the label recognition of this label didn't take very many chances. And the deeper I got, the more I could see how safe the mainstream major labels were and how much riskier a Blue Note or a Prestige was willing to be for being able to speak that racial context, that black experience, that voicing of frustration, anger, tyranny. It's filled with all those Blue Note hard bop records. It's omnipresent in a lot of those records. And there's some Blue Note stuff that doesn't have it. There's some Blue Note stuff that's much more just, the happier cats, the guys who are trying to be more positive. But even they have a sorrow and oppression that they're speaking of. Lockjaw Davis, who's not really a Blue Note guy, but he's got a lot of sorrow coming through the joy in his horn. There's no way a guy can be that much full of the love of life if he's not trying to overcome the great pains in his life. Like, he just plays with so much joy. And it's players like that some of the avant-garde people don't get. They're like, oh, he's just kind of blowing, he's just having fun. He's not pushing the art form. He's not redefining tone and reinventing the wheel. No, because the vehicle he's in doesn't need to be reinvented. He's saying what he needs to say. He's getting it off his chest. So that was always my take. So again, I'm just going to wrap it up there. Y'all be safe. Say a prayer for my mother-in-law. Hopefully she's fine. She's supposed to be coming home today. I'm actually sitting here waiting for her to come back. But I probably won't be home till Sunday. But I do plan on doing a little special episode tomorrow on some of the racial issues in America here in Freeport as a microcosm. So tune in for that. Catch up on some of the old stuff. I'm out. Peace.